Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Interviewing Hartford Storytelling Approach and Practice, broken down into 4 simple steps with Wil Weldon. My name is Chris Everett, and I am the Artistic Director at the Southern Documentary Fund. The Southern Documentary Fund is a nonprofit that cultivates documentary media made in or about the American South. We believe that media has the power to change lives, and we provide makers with resources to champion Southern storytelling, serving as a leading advocate, providing filmmakers and artists with professional support, filmmaking grants, and fiscal sponsorship. Wil Weldon has 2 decades of experience interviewing people for video production. This webinar will dive into his approach of interviewing subjects, which he calls Hartford storytelling. Will cover the basics of this approach, how to apply it to a variation of situations, and a few examples, as well as time for questions. Other events that we have coming up at the Southern Documentary Fund include a virtual film screening of the documentary Refuge, exclusively on Kinema on August 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with also a post-film discussion with the co-directors of the film. We also have a resource webinar coming up on August 27th at 12 p.m. with the Documentary Producers Alliance that will introduce the new Ethics Resource Library, a living, evolving tool designed to help filmmakers navigate the complex ethical questions that arise throughout the creative process. Also, if you love all of this SDF programming that we do, and want to be more involved with the SDF family, check out our newly launched membership program. With an annual SDF membership, you'll unlock exclusive perks like discounted SDF screenings, behind the scenes access to filmmaker conversations, priority registration for our most popular programs, such as the annual convening, and access to other filmmaker-centered resources. And also, with our webinars, they've been pretty much free for a while. Starting in September, our webinars won't be free anymore. There will be a small fee. That's why you need to join our membership program, so you can get discounts and actually watch these webinars and participate in these webinars for free. So definitely check out our membership program. Last but not least, the 2025 SDF production grants are open. This grant is open until August 15th. Get your applications in, get those applications in. We also have an info session coming up next Tuesday, July 29th at 1 p.m. So definitely join me for that as I kind of break down the application process. We're looking forward to seeing all of your wonderful documentary projects for our production grant. Also, I'll be adding links in the chat box throughout the day's webinar with more information about the membership program if you're interested in that. Also, the grant and the info session and other upcoming SDF events. But cool, without further ado, Wil Weldon, it's all yours.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Christopher. It's great to be here. I'm excited for this. If y'all could go ahead and put in the chat where you're from, where you are right now, that would be great. I'd just love to have an idea of, what kind of range of people, and also you can feel free to put in what your reason for interviewing is. There's a variety of things I'll cover here. Great, Chapel Hill, Charleston. All right. All right, great. We're covering a lot of territory in the Southeast. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And I recommend that it's probably better to put your the Zoom window in the bottom right. I think that's probably going to be the most effective place to see everything. Oh, South Africa. I love that. Wow, that's interesting. Okay. So I might have included a few more than four components in here, but it's okay. It's a fairly simple approach here. So how to interview anyone with great results every time. And this is something that I learned, well, I guess the core of this approach, the beginning of this approach, I was taught by a filmmaker, excuse me, a photographer, who used to be the director of Duke Photography, Chris Hildreth. And it was told this fairly early in my career. And I have combined it with some other things that I've studied and known. So I wanted to just go ahead. Okay, so I'll get into all the details of the of interviewing and heart forward storytelling, but I'll start with who am I and why should you care? Um, I'm a native North Carolinian. I grew up in a small town, Thomasville, North Carolina, near Greensboro. I went to public schools all the way through high school, and then went to Duke University. Um, I lived in San Francisco for a while. After college, and then became a holistic massage therapist. And the reason that's relevant will come in a little bit later, but it's kind of wild when when I started doing video, people said, "Wait, how you're not going to combine massage and video? That's just creepy." And I said, "No, no, no." And then, of course, 20 years later, I found a way to apply some of the principles that I had learned as a holistic massage therapist with my approaches to storytelling. I consider myself a double blue. I have an undergraduate degree from Duke and a master's in journalism from UNC, but don't worry, my allegiance is always with Duke. I try not to say bad things about UNC. It's a great school, and I have lots of friends and family who have gone there, and they gave me a degree that I'm putting to use every day, so I really can't complain about UNC. And also, I've been working as a self-employed video journalist and filmmaker for 18 years. It's kind of crazy. When I started out in 2007, right out of journalism school, I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if I could be a self-employed artist? And I wonder how, if that's possible, how would that go? And now 18 years later, um, I'm I'm still doing it and still loving it, and trying to shift into like a different model with my practice. I've had two projects sponsored by SDF. One was about Reynolds Price, who was my mentor, and I lived with him for a year, caretaking him, and ran his life the year after I graduated from Duke. He was an author and pretty well-known figure in the Piedmont of North Carolina until he died in 2011. Um, this is, and the other project I should mention was about Alan Gurganis, who is still alive, and he's an author who lives in Hillsborough. I'll post a link to the documentary with Alan Gurganis a little bit later. This is my favorite interview setup. This is my living room, and I, it's colorful. There's depth. There's natural light on the sides. And I've done lots of interviews here. It's easy because I don't have to worry about, lugging the gear all over the place. And there are little piles of books and magazines and things in the side. But it's okay to have that, in interview settings because you can just sort of keep it out of the frame. But I like to have a varied background. I like to have color and I like to have things set up. I'm imagining that most of you are filmmakers, but maybe we'll have some audio storytellers as well, and be happy to, listen to your backgrounds and what questions you may have about different things. But anyway, I like this picture because it just shows all the possibility. It's an empty chair. There are two cameras, two lights. It's pretty simple. One microphone. Um, so anyway, this is just something that I love to, uh, to represent how I tell stories. So I'll jump into the principles of what I call heart forward storytelling. And I'll explain the name of it just quickly, briefly. But so this is where it dovetails into my background as a holistic massage therapist. I learned when I got licensed in North Carolina in 2004 and 5. I studied Reiki, and I never had really expected to study Reiki, but it just blew my mind. It just changed everything for me. And Reiki is, it literally means, or it translates to universal life force, which a lot of people can say, oh, that's just chi. Well, it is, but it's Reiki is hands-on healing, and it focuses a lot on the chakras. And if you're not familiar with the chakras, I won't go too much into that, but there are seven energy centers in the body that correspond to different glands and different organs, different energy types, and they also correspond to the seven colors of the color wheel, the Roy G. Biv colors. And the heart chakra is the fourth chakra, which is represented by the color green. And I've realized that in my storytelling, a lot of times I meditate on channeling the sort of the heart chakra, the green energy. And I'll get into more of that in just a second. But that's where the name comes from. I'm not doing Reiki in an interview setting, in the storytelling setting, but it's useful to know that there's a benign sort of higher intention for doing the interview, for leading this way. Um, Being open and curious. Okay, so that's sort of suggests an open heart, but also an open mind, being curious about the other person, the person you're talking to. I like to think about interviews as conversations, and that's useful for a lot of reasons. And so sometimes in this presentation, I'll refer to the conversation or the interview. I use them kind of interchangeably. A lot of times I begin by telling people this is just a conversation. You know, you've just met me, but we're just having a conversation. Try to ignore the cameras. So it's also really important to be empathetic and compassionate. And they're not the same thing, empathy and compassion, but I think being empathetic and just being responsive to the other person's experience, that you may not understand what they've been going through or what they've been doing, what is associated with what they're about to tell you, but to be compassionate and to, respond appropriately, to try to not have too much of a working on your own agenda. Um, so prioritizing their experience. Now, this is really kind of the heart of it. Not intending to go back to the heart chakra, but the this is what the photographer Chris Hildreth told me about 15 years ago. He said, how do you do a shoot?" And I was early in my career as freelancer, and he said, "How do you do a shoot?" And I just told him, I focus on what I need to do, what I need to hear, and then we do this thing. And he said, "No, no, no. Let me just give you a hint. You need to make sure that this experience for this other person is just the best part of their day, and really focus on making it a positive, wonderful thing for them." So that is the way I go into every interview, every conversation that's recorded. Do what's possible to make it the absolute best, 30, 45, 60 minutes, however long it is, of the other person's day. And I can go into the details, the components of that, but that's really what it all boils down to. And if you do that, it takes practice, of course, but if you do that and you're successful, you'll get great results. I'm just going to peek at the chat real quick here for a second, see if I've missed anything. Okay. Uh, Doc production, audio production, and oral histories. Okay, lots of things in here. Great. Okay, so having no ego is also part of the approach to heart forward storytelling. And this is really pretty challenging. But if you go in and you just don't think about what you need or what you want or what you're trying to accomplish, try to minimize your ego. And that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of um, reflection and yeah, just practice. But um, it can be the really most important component of this. And going hand in glove with no ego is minimizing your agenda. And that might sound counterproductive or counterintuitive because you're going into an interview, recording the conversation with a purpose. But if you try to minimize that purpose and just be and reflect back on these early the early items in this list, being open and curious and listening to the other person, then your agenda matters, of course, to you. It's important, but try to minimize it. And that can be really challenging. I mean, it can be, but it can really be important because then if you're not thinking as much about what you're trying to accomplish, thinking more about what the other person has to tell you, wants to tell you, is open to telling you, then everything unfolds in an entirely different way. Okay, so why care about heart-forward storytelling and interviewing? This is, kind of important, right? So it's a little bit of an odd approach to conducting an interview, to not have an agenda, to think about the heart chakra, to, a little bit woo-woo, but really, this is something that probably none of you would be here if you hadn't conducted an interview at some point. And coming out of journalism school, actually in journalism school, I realized that most people who are doing an interview think that they know how to do the interview. And there is nothing in journalism school, there's virtually no time or attention given to how to conduct an interview. This is something that most people think they already know. Oh, I'm doing this documentary. I know I'm a filmmaker. I know how to do an interview. I know how to talk to people. I know how to ask questions. And if I don't, I'll just keep going until I can figure it out. It's really important to remember that not many people ever look forward to a video interview, excuse me, unless they are a narcissist or unless they are experienced in being on camera. And probably I would say 19 out of 20 people you're going to interview are not experienced with being on camera, in front of a camera. People tend to freeze up. They tend to overemphasize this process of being on a camera or having a microphone in front of them, and they get scared. They get worried. Oh my gosh, is my hair right? Oh, I have this blemish on my face. Oh, am I wearing the right clothes? Does my voice sound good today? I didn't get enough sleep last night. They can talk themselves into lots of reasons why this is not going to go well. So it's really important to go into an interview realizing that this other person is not crazy, probably not crazy about being there. So part of that is also recognizing that we are all human beings and we all have unique dispositions. Most of the time, you or I or any of us are not going to be able to anticipate or predict where this person is coming from, what their previous night was like, their previous week was like, what they had for breakfast, or did they wake up grumpy? We all have a unique disposition, and going in being open and receptive to the fact that this person's disposition or what they've been going through is not something you can predict. It's not something you are going to know most of the time. Perhaps it's maybe it's a relative or it's somebody you're already friends with, and you know their disposition a little bit, but their experiences leading up to the time when you're sitting down with them to have this conversation are probably not entirely known to you. And there's one really important reason that you should care about heart-forward storytelling and interviewing. As a filmmaker or a storytelling professional or somebody who does it as an important hobby, this is the single biggest non-technical factor you can control to impact the product you're creating. It's really important to think about this because for me, and I think for most of you, this is really important. You can have a great microphone. You can have the perfect lens. You can have the prime lens that costs $2,000. You can have a red camera. You can have the lighting is perfect. You control the external sound. You have no background noise or animals or anything else going on. So you're going to get crisp sound. You're going to get the lighting is wonderful. Everything's in focus. You have the frame of the camera is all that. That's all technical stuff. And you can worry about that all day long. And some people do, and I'm not saying not to, but when you get down to the non-technical factors, the human elements, the what makes us, what's our disposition, what makes us who we are, and what we say is unique and important. The how you conduct the conversation is huge. So this is something I remind myself constantly. I'm doing 15 interviews this week. I did about 15 last week. No, actually, it's just 12 this week. 15 last week with students at Duke, but it's important to go in and remember that I can really freak out and worry about the camera and about the microphone and the lights, but a lot of what is going to make the interview pop or be something really, really wonderful that you can be proud of is how you approach it. And so I realized in putting together this deck that I have one slide that out of, I think there are 13 here, one slide that is focused on during the interview. The rest of it is leading up to it and then ending the interview and how you think about your approach and how you what kind of attitude you adopt. So those factors really affect what kind of result you're going to get. And I'll talk about the results a little bit later, but okay, so it's also important to remember what your purpose is. I mean, I know that so we have in the chat that we have documentary production, audio production, oral histories. So some of you may be, feel free to put in the chat if you are interested in just audio interviews or just video interviews, or, I've done interviews for market research with audiences who have all over the place in urban environments, just walking into their home for the first time um, on video. But then we really care about okay, it's primarily video interviews. That makes sense. Um, so, let's assume that most of us are doing video interviews, maybe some of our audio interviews. Well, audio stories, um, video stories, information gathering, like I said, market research. I had a small business that I operated for about 7 years called Storied Legacy. And Storied Legacy was focused on important life legacy stories of families with aging relatives, people who have really important stories they wanted to archive as their relatives were aging, and they knew, like, better do this now, better talk to somebody now. So those are really important interviews too, and they can be sometimes more challenging than an interview with somebody you've never met before. Um, just for art, sometimes we want to just have an installation and we want to have an interview that tells something that you want to just turn into just art, and maybe that dovetails into audio stories and video stories. But these are all important for remembering, why you're doing the interview and what you want to get out of it. I think you want to adjust your approach and adjust your focus according to the result that you're trying to achieve. Okay, prepare just enough. This is kind of a little bit, I can imagine this being controversial, but this is something that I have come to believe really thoroughly. And I have a story I can tell in just a second about preparing just enough, not too much, but definitely be sure you're prepared. Um, okay, with whom are you talking? That's one of the first things you want to think about. Who is this person? What might they tell me? Who are they? Maybe you have basic information, like they're a CEO of a company, or they've experienced some profound trauma in their life. Um, I like to go into most interviews with more or less a blank slate, not knowing just a little bit about the person, not knowing too much, because I want to let them tell me who they are. You might want to know some basic things about what they're doing generally with their time. Do they work all the time? Are they working with people all the time? Are they working behind a computer all the time? Are they are they retired and they sit around and they read all the time, but they don't talk to people a whole lot? This is a pretty important component to consider when you're thinking about just basic facts. So you want to know, a little bit in advance of how they spend their time. That's one way to approach and to begin to understand who you're talking to and how you might begin to interact with them. So why do they care to share their time with you? The time is one of the most valuable things we all have. So when you're asking someone, maybe you didn't ask them, maybe someone else asked them, and you're doing the process for on behalf of someone else. But why you want to think about what the motivation is. Are they incredibly busy, let's say medical professional, and they have a packed schedule? They carved out 20 minutes of their day to talk to you because this is something that's important to their employer, let's say. Um, it's important to think about what their motivation is because you're really asking them. It's a great gift that they're sharing their time with you. That's something I like to always remember as well, that um, just remember their motivation, and if possible, you can reward that motivation that they have. It's also useful to ask, what do they know about you? Maybe they know a lot about you, maybe they don't know a lot. Um, I think it's not useful generally to do a thorough web search about the other person because they're probably not going to do that about you. They might walk in and say, "Oh, I know where you were born. I knew where you grew up. I know where you went to school. I know the last three projects you worked on." That's great, but I think it's interesting and important to think about what precedes this relationship you're about to have with a person. Um, and then as I said, what's the minimum you should know about them? I try not to Google a person before I go into an interview, unless somebody has given me no information, said, I need you to talk to this person, and they don't really say why. You might know the project you're working on, or um, you might know that this person fits in, somebody else mentioned them, but you don't really know much about them. So it's good to know the bare minimum. So then you don't have too much bias. You can be open, you can be curious, you can be empathetic, and just let them unfold and tell you what it is they want to tell you and what they want you to know. And this goes back to the title of this slide. Do not over prepare. Very rarely do I write down questions beforehand. This is the part that I think is counterintuitive and maybe controversial. Lots of people over prepare. Oh, I've got this interview. It's a president of a university. It's a doctor. It's this person who invented this cure for something, invented this incredible procedure for how to do such and such. But so I need to ask him all the details. I need to ask him. That is usually not useful. I think it's more useful to especially with this approach to storytelling and for interviewing, to let it unfold organically. Perhaps you want to write some notes, some things that you might want to hear them say, or some things that you might want to touch on, but then let the conversation unfold. Let it be um, an organic generation that you can experience with them. You can be much more human. You can be much more authentic when you are just responding to the things they say and the way they say them without having explicit, rigid questions. Now, there are times when you can remember somebody else said something useful, mentioning this person, and you want to give them an opportunity to respond to that. So those are times when you might want to say, hey, Alice said that you really like to walk your dog after work, and sometimes you cancel that because important things come up. Could you tell me about that? Okay, great. That's a specific reference, but you want to kind of let that question unfold organically. That's where you can make a note. Oh, walking dog after work, sometimes canceled. Great. You can touch on that, but let it be organic and let it be natural. I always find that it's important to be totally present, and that generates authenticity, and being grateful. Let them know that you're really happy that they're sharing their time with you. That's it can be a powerful thing. You don't want to be overly grateful, but you want to be, I try to keep eye contact with somebody. And again, eye contact, I don't think I put this in here explicitly, but eye contact is something that I think is really important throughout an interview. Um, okay, I see a raised hand. If it's all right, I want to just um, get through some of this. Well, actually, I'll go ahead and uh, Farad, is that Farad? Do you want to, let's see, could you unmute yourself and you want to go ahead and tell me what your question is? Okay. Is it Farid Ahmad?
It, Farid, you can go ahead and put your question in the chat box as well.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to keep going. Farid, feel free to put your question in the chat box and I can get to it. Or
Sorry.
There he is.
Okay, here you are. Okay, go ahead. Okay, if I'll definitely save some time for questions at the end, and I'll be sure to prioritize you, Fareed. Okay, going into the interview, set your frame of mind. This is all some of the stuff we've covered before. You want to be on time. Super, super important. That gets back to respecting the fact that they're giving you their time. Be open. Again, this is back to the open and curious approach to heart-forward storytelling. Be positive. I try to be warm and smile and, let them know that I appreciate this time, but don't be overly effusive. Don't be over the top positive. Be curious, be calm and in control. Um, I think this is also, I have dogs and I've trained all my dogs myself. And, sort of one thing a lot of dog trainers teach is calm and assertive. So I think you want to be calm, but you want to be sure you are understanding that you're in control of the situation. A lot of times I like to make small talk before an interview as I'm getting the camera focused and I'm getting the microphone on. So that rapport is all really important in establishing that you're in control, but you're calm and you want to help them to be natural and relaxed. As soon as you greet them, um, the conversation starts as soon as they walk in the room. That's when the interview really starts. When you see each other and they walk in the room or you walk in the room, you're probably going to have the camera and your equipment set up ahead of time. But that's where you want to really focus. As soon as you greet them, you shake their hand or you bow or maybe you hug them or whatever is appropriate. That's when the interview is starting. And so I like to think about that, establishing the rapport and establishing the connection from that moment. Might read their energy. Perhaps they're uptight, they're in a hurry, they're nervous. You can allow that to to connect the rapport. Perhaps if they're uptight or if they're in a hurry, maybe you want to move kind of quickly and you want to be sure not to tarry, um, not to waste any time. Um, Maybe they're just nervous and you want to do something to calm them down. But anyway, this is really important to read their energy. Again, as I said, don't be overly polite, overly positive, but you want to be polite, smile, be friendly. Some of these things are obvious, but I think it's also important to remember. I try to make simple compliments sometimes. You don't want to, overly compliment someone, but maybe say, "Hey, I glanced at that article that you wrote the other day, and I thought it was really interesting title," or I love this read on you," or something like that. But you want to read the room. You don't want to be overly polite, but I think that can help to uh, contribute to a relaxation in the person. Okay, there's the slide that maybe we've all been waiting for, but during the interview and the conversation. Number one, practice listening. It may seem obvious, but you can't say it too much. I like to think in terms of an 80-20 rule. Um, Let them do 80% of the talking and you do 20% of the talking. So that's just a really useful thing to remember. In my interviews, I do a lot of nodding and smiling. And maybe you can gesture with your hands like, "Oh, that's great. That's great." But I don't count that as talking. Um, I think if you go beyond 20% of talking, you're going to change the dynamic of the interview, of the conversation. This is super, super, super important. And probably most of you know what this means, but just don't step on their responses. When they say something, let them finish. Even if you agree and you want to celebrate what they've said, don't wait until they're just getting to the end of their saying, yes, 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 I know. Just I think this pause and when someone is talking can be golden. Um, I was taught early that when someone is talking and they finish talking, I probably should have put this in the slide, but it's worth just telling you. When they finish talking, nod, smile, don't say anything. Maybe you pause for about 5 seconds. That uncomfortable pause for 5 seconds can give them the opportunity to say something else. A lot of times, the thing they say during that pause or after that pause can be the most profound part of that answer because they are subconsciously thinking, oh, he's expecting me to say something else, or she really wants me to, expand on that. Maybe I didn't say enough. So if you don't step on their responses and you pause after their, just to make sure they have said everything they possibly want to say, that pregnant pause for 5 or 10 or 15 seconds, it might be uncomfortable, but it can be really, really useful in generating the response you want. I like to start thinking of the next question or prompt before they finish speaking. It's it can be really awkward when they finish and then you start scratching your head and you're looking around the room and you look at your notes and you're not sure what it is you want to ask them or suggest next. So it's useful to think about what you might want to say, even if it's not exactly germane to what they're already talking about, but you want to generate the next response, their next prompt before they finish. I ask open-ended questions. This is also, again, maybe obvious, but it doesn't hurt to say it too much. So, how did it feel when that person told you that you were not related to them and you thought you were? What if someone said they never wanted to see you again? How would that make you feel? What if someone told you, whatever, you can fill in the blank as it's germane to your particular topic or your interview. But I like to ask things in a way that allows people to speak in complete sentences. You don't want them to say, yes, exactly, because that's not a response you can use. So open-ended questions generally allow for complete sentences and complete responses, and it allows them to say what they want to say. This gets back to the curiosity and openness part. When you think of the great invention that you had in 2002, what what thoughts come up? What do people say about that? How would you summarize that? Those are the kinds of questions that are useful to answer to to ask, excuse me. I like to let their responses breathe a little bit. This gets back to not stepping on their responses, but give them a little bit of an opportunity to to reflect on that. Maybe you don't just rush into the next topic. Um, when it's sometimes it's not appropriate, but when it's appropriate, add humor or a personal note like, yeah, I know my brother or my sister or somebody told me that one time and I thought it was just amazing and that totally resonates with me. You can add something that's maybe that's not funny, but you might want to add something that lightens the tone just a little bit, but only when it's appropriate. Again, getting back to smiling lightly and making eye contact always. Um, I like to smile, but not too much. You don't want to be cheesy, but you always also want to remind, if you smile, you remind them that it's okay to smile. And when people smile on camera, they look and sound better. That's really, really crucial. Okay, now we're getting to the interview is wrapping up. You've heard everything you needed to hear, and you're ready to end the conversation. You can pay attention to cues. Maybe they're telling you that they're finished talking to you. Maybe their body language, maybe they're starting to lean back or they're shifting in their chair a lot. They're looking side to side. you can tell they're probably ready to end this. You don't want to keep people beyond the time that they want to be there. I try to think of something simple, but maybe it's a little bit profound to wrap up the interview. And that can signal to them that you are really satisfied with how the interview has gone and how this conversation's gone. Tell me, how would you it's often important. I do this a lot in interviews to ask the first question again as the last question. So tell me how you would summarize this to a complete stranger. That sometimes can be really a great closing question. Um, somebody who doesn't have any prior knowledge, how would you want them to remember this? That can be also really a great way to signal that you're wrapping up the conversation. You want to let them feel that you're excited, even if you're not. You want them to let them feel that this was a great conversation, a great interview to have with you. Also, express gratitude. That never hurts. Um, smile and say, "Thank you so much for your time." Always a perfect way to end the conversation. And this last item is, it might seem a little bit simple or obvious, but I have done zero marketing over the last 18 years. I have not advertised or marketed my services, and I've gotten lots of word of mouth referrals. And I believe this is part of core to my coaching business now, and to how in the book is that is why do we care about this? Because when somebody says something good about you to other people, it will generate more work and easier work. So maybe you're not making money specifically in the kind of work you're doing, but if you say, I hope you enjoyed this experience. I hope this was a lot better than you thought it would be. You can make sort of joke like that. I hope this was well, this was really fun for me. I hope this was great for you. That will give them the opportunity to say something positive. Most of the time, they will say something positive. If they are looking at their watch and they're ready to get out of there, they can say, okay, great, thanks. Yeah. A lot of times I've had people say, this was so much better than I thought it would be. That's great. That's exactly what you want to hear. So if you give them the opportunity to say something positive, they're probably going to walk out of there and tell their friend or relative or somebody else, hey, that interview, Will, was really fun. That was fun. I wasn't looking forward to that, but it was way better than I thought it would be. So then you can wrap up the interview, and you can go about your work, and you can archive the interview, and you can transcribe it, and then you can edit it and figure out what you want to do with it. Um, I've included some links here to some examples of my work. Obviously, I'm going to be ready to take some questions now for the next 15 or 20 minutes. Um, most of the examples of my work are on my website, wilweldon.com. Um, so Rarefied is a documentary I finished in 2016. It was about 9 families with children with rare genetic diseases. I made it with some Duke researchers, and it was funded by an external source, not affiliated with Duke, but a genetic testing company, and they wanted these stories to come to light. So the film was really important for the family's stories to be heard and told, because they had never had the opportunity to tell them in most cases. But the film was a little bit heavy. So um, it's probably the one feature film that I'm most proud of, but didn't really get a lot of play beyond Duke and these families who were in the film. But if you're interested, I condensed the Vimeo link into just a tinyurl.com/rarefied film. Feel free to watch that. I'd love to know what you think about it. It's all original music. I shot the vast majority of it myself. I did a lot of the editing. I worked with a local editor here in Durham. Some of you may be familiar with Jim Haverkamp, great editor. Worked with him on several films, including also The Imaginary Village of Alan Gurganis. And that was oh yeah, Eric, yeah, you know Jim. Jim is wonderful. Um, really smart, generous, wonderful guy. and he works in through the Center for Documentary Studies, and he works with Duke students a lot. Um, his it can be tough to get on his schedule. He's really busy, but he's a wonderful editor to work with. Alan also, I mean, excuse me, Jim also helped me edit Imaginary Village of Alan Gurganus. I had an edit that I did, and then I took it to Jim. I said, "Okay, fix this, make it better." And so he was really great with that. I have another film that I'm working on now about a band in Chapel Hill, The Old Ceremony. They've been together 20 years, and last year was their 20th year together. They produced their first album in 9 years, and I did a bunch of interviews and recording, and so I'm just about to turn that film over to Jim to do the same thing. Just okay, Jim, fix this, polish this, make it better than I've been able to do on my own. So this Imaginary Village of Alan Gurganus was also this was sponsored by Southern Documentary Fund. This Alan lives in Hillsborough. He has advanced Parkinson's, and when I finished the film, he took me out to dinner and said, "Well, congratulations, you just captured the last good years of my life. I've got Parkinson's." I mean, that was 9 years ago. He's still doing okay. I mean, he can't get around very well, and he stays at home most of the time. But he's still writing, and his writing is going to live on for a long time, I believe. But anyway, if you want to watch that film, you can see that here at this also another tiny URL. If you want to contact me, if you have any questions or want to get in touch with me or um, reach out, here's my email address. I'm also a storytelling coach. I have a quick resource right here at this URL, which I have appended SDF and then today's date. So if you want to, it's mostly a PDF, but you can also, there should be a link to booking a session with me to talk about coaching. Um, and then I have a book, which is Interviewing, Heart Forward Storytelling, and Holistic Communication, which currently is available only to my coaching clients, but I'm planning to release it in December this year on Amazon. And if you would like to, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. I don't send out newsletters very often, probably maybe twice a quarter. And you can subscribe to that at my website, wilweldon.com. So I think I've probably gone a little bit over time. I was worried about having enough content, but clearly I didn't have to worry about that. So if anyone wants to ask questions in the chat, feel free to. Um, or if you have praise or if you have criticisms, I'm welcome to all. I'm looking forward to all that. Um, and be
Yeah,
happy
well,
to.
we got a question right here from Eric Barstow. He asks, "Can you speak to why it is important to not be overly grateful or gushy or positive, and how to know when you are starting to do that?"
Yes, yes. I think first thing you can know when you're starting to do that by sort of reading their energy, reading the room. Um, but I think mostly it's important because you don't want to, if you're overly effusive, you're overly positive or grateful, you'll put them off. It might come across as not authentic, not genuine. And you want to be genuine. You want to let them know how you appreciate it. So you say something sincere, like, I know you're busy. I really appreciate this time. Have a good rest of your day. That's simple. That's great. But if you say, "Oh, you're so wonderful. I just really appreciated this. Oh, this is just," that's not really helpful or useful. So I think that can then create, if you're overly effusive, overly positive, that can start to work in a negative way against you. So I think it's just important to be genuine, be authentic, but remember to be grateful. So I had two little stories I was going to tell earlier. One about not over preparing, but preparing just enough. Um, when I was in journalism school, I had the opportunity to interview Al Franken. It was an audio interview, and Al was in Durham for his daughter went to Duke, and he was giving a talk in Chapel Hill, and I was interviewing him for a radio show, and so I went in. It was a Friday morning. I think I had to be there at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and I'd been out kind of late the night before, so brain was a little bit hazy, but I was there. I was on time. I had my audio equipment. I walked in, I did the I had the questions, sort of notes written down on the questions I wanted to ask him. But I had been thinking about, oh, this was right around the time with the Duke lacrosse thing. It'd be interesting to hear his response on having a student at Duke. What would he have to say about this lacrosse scandal thing? And so anyway, I did the interview. I asked him all the things I need to ask him. Thank you so much, Mr. Franken. It was just the two of us in the room. I gathered my equipment quickly and walked out. And about 10 seconds after I was out of the room, I remembered I didn't ask him the thing about the lacrosse. And I went back in, went back, knocked on the door, and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Franken, I just had one more thing." He said, "Oh my gosh, is that you again?" "No, no, I don't have any more time for you. Get out." So I left. I lost my opportunity. That was a perfect illustration of where you want to prepare just enough, but not so much that you're constantly looking at your notes and constantly looking at your questions. But that interview experience reminded me that I never want to miss an opportunity again. And that's part of the mindset going in and being prepared and being aware. Sorry, I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's questions. Any other questions that anybody has right now?
Oh, yeah, yeah, that was a good example too, man. It made me think about a time that happened to me as well. We got a couple questions right here. We got someone that's anonymous. They said, "Can you talk about pre-interviewing and the process of engaging potential subjects before the recorded interview?"
Yeah. Um, okay, so pre-interview, I like to just, if you have their name or you obviously have a way of contacting them, it's nice to maybe check in, you schedule the interview, and then maybe check in the day before and remind them that you're having this conversation the next day. And then I like to say just it's just going to be a conversation. I'm looking forward to have a conversation with you. And you might want to remind them not to wear, like, the shirt I'm wearing right now is not a good shirt to wear for an interview, because if you have tight patterns, if you have, and that's sort of one reason I wore it, if you have tight patterns or bright colors, they can create a moire effect on cameras, and that can be really not optimal. So you might want to tell them don't wear bright clothes. If you don't mind, don't wear something that's too low cut. You don't want to, you don't want something to be too revealing. You want it to be professional, but that's really all the instruction I give them. I'm looking forward to seeing you. And then you might want to have an idea of how um, how you want to talk to them, some ideas, some things that you want to talk to them about, where you can start. But then you have to, at a certain point, you just have to trust your own instincts and to be curious and let that guide you. Um, I'm looking at Eric Deal's question: how do you balance listening and guidance during interviewing sessions to ensure the person discovers their own insight rather than being directed? Yes, that's a great question. And that gets to the open-ended questions. So I like to always ask, how does something feel? Or tell me about, or what did that make you think about? So you get to a little bit into being an armchair psychologist. So you can say, just being curious, not that you're going to evaluate them, but you say, that's really interesting. That must have been really challenging. How did that leave you feeling? And then just let them respond. And sometimes they don't want to respond. They won't tell you how something made you feel, and that's okay. You can read that response and then quickly pivot and move on to the next issue. Um, I hope that answered that question. And then a specific example where interviewing helped a freelancer or filmmaker break through a creative or professional block. Well, through a creative block, I guess. So Charles Guggenheim, the first advice I was ever given in filmmaking was from Charles Guggenheim. He was a legendary filmmaker, documentary filmmaker. And when I was making my first documentary on Reynolds Price in 1997, I was just doing these interviews about Reynolds with professors at Duke and friends of his, and I was living with him for a year, and I just got to this kind of, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. And Reynolds said, "Why don't you just reach out to Charles Guggenheim? He made a film about me a few years ago, and he loves working with young people." And I thought, well, that's crazy, but okay. And I got his number. Reynolds gave me his number. I called his office in DC, and lo and behold, the next day he called me back. And I said, Mr. Guggenheim, I've seen your film. It's really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for calling me back. I'm making this documentary about Reynolds' teaching, and I'm wondering what you can tell me. How, how can um, how can I create a film when I don't really know what the story is? I don't know where to go from here. I'm just kind of stuck. And he said, well, the best thing I can tell you is to shoot and shoot and shoot and let your footage talk to you. And that is something that has guided me endlessly. I can't tell you how many times when I've thought, well, I don't really know where to go. Just keep shooting and let the footage talk to you. And then with regards to interviewing, if you're feeling a block and you don't know what you have to have this interview, but you don't know where it's going to take you or what it's going to do for you, sometimes it's just useful to just listen and just let that guide you. And maybe something, just try to be creative, try to be curious. Um, try to, if something catches your attention, go with it. Sort of the shiny object syndrome. Like, okay, oh, there's a shiny object over here. I'm going to just follow that a little bit and see where it leads me. It might not lead me anywhere great, but it might really lead me to the perfect metaphor that I need to finish putting this film together, telling the story. So I would just remember that guy, shoot, shoot, and shoot, and let your footage talk to you. It's powerful advice. And Guggenheim died about 6 years later. Um, but I'm really lucky that I had that opportunity to talk to him and ask him that.
Cool. Cool. We have another question. We got another question. What is your strategy if someone crucial to your story doesn't want to be in the film? They pretty much doesn't want to talk to you. How do you turn their first no into a yes and do the interview?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I think ultimately you have to respect them. You have to, if they're adamant that they don't want to be on camera, and I've encountered this a lot with students at Duke that I interview, they just don't want to be on camera, and you've been told you really need to, this project that they're involved with, you really need to make a video about it, or you need to make a film about this, and the students really don't want to. Well, you have to respect them. And sometimes, I mean, there's an example that I'm working with now of a project lead on a project that we're trying to profile. The project lead is very obviously an LGBTQ person, not sure how they identify, doesn't really matter, but they don't feel safe or comfortable being on camera. And you know what? I am not going to push that. I am going to respect that person's boundaries. I'm going to respect that person's needs. Sometimes you can hope or cross your fingers by telling somebody who's connected to that person that it would be really great if you could hear from them and you're really sorry that you can't have the conversation with them. So you can sort of go around the side and try to use some sort of peer influence, but you have to be really careful with that because you don't want to come across as pushy ever. Being pushy is one of the worst things you can do as a filmmaker, as a um, as a storyteller, because if you're pushy, even if you do get the interview with them, it's probably not going to be a productive or fun interview. Um, so let's see. Here we go. Hopefully, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm happy to share these slides. Probably the easiest way would be for you to email me, and then I can send you the link to the deck. And yeah, but I'm happy to share that stuff with you. Have I answered these questions satisfactorily enough?
Oh yeah, for sure. I got. I guess I want to get in a question before we end
Yeah, please.
today. But I want to do a comment first. I know on your slide, I know you were talking about being on time for the interview. I think that's key, man. And you sharing your story. I haven't really shared this story with much people, but I had an opportunity to interview Spike Lee for one of my films on the Laurenberg Institute. It was the very first film. I didn't get to finish it, but Spike Lee's great grandfather was involved in starting the school in 1904. And so I finally locked him down, go up to Brooklyn. We were going to his office, 40 acres and everything. Man, I was like an hour late. We couldn't find nowhere to park. It was totally my fault. I should have prepared. And then once I got there to the building and we walked in, he was leaving. And he literally just told us to my face. He said, "Thank you for shit," and just walked off. I was like, "Oh man." And also, man, he shares the story quite often at his NYU class, because a friend of mine took his class a couple years later, and she talked about that. He shared it with, with them. So ever since then, man, I prepare myself for like parking situations, all those things, making sure, we have enough time to set up lighting and all that stuff, man. So that taught me a valuable lesson, that you have to prepare that way as well, of making sure you got enough time and space, because dealing with those type of folks, man, they're constantly moving, they're busy, and
Yeah.
so that was my wake-up call years ago. But I had one quick question, man. I know I've dealt with this a lot, and I still do. When you're interviewing people, you might have some people that are long-winded. I run into that a lot. And I don't know really how to manage that, man. A lot of times I just let them just talk, but you just can't just have them just, each question seems like it's an hour-long answer. What's your approach to, I guess, handling long-winded interviews?
Yeah, great question. And I deal with that a lot, and it's really, it can be tricky. One thing you can do is, if they start going on and on and on, you can just look at your notes repeatedly, and then you can maybe look at the camera. I do operate as a one-man band most of the time, and so I'm doing the camera, the lights, and the audio myself, and that can be really useful because they don't have to, there's not a lot of distractions. But then, so that can also give you the opportunity. You look at the camera and you can, you check your lights, and if they pick up on the fact that you are not paying full attention, they'll start to wrap it up. And then once they wrap it up, you can say, "That's really great. I might ask this in a slightly different way, and I'm wondering if you can tell me just in 2 or 3 sentences this time." So give them some parameters next time for the next question, and say, you know, um, "I'm wondering if you can give me a 2 or 3 sentence. I mean, that was a great answer you just gave me. I really understand everything about why you did that and how you felt about that. But if I'm a complete stranger, how would you tell me in 2 or 3 sentences an elevator pitch?" Right? And then if they don't do it in 2 or 3 sentences the next time, you go on to the next question, you keep going, then you come back to it again later. And then you
Right.
say, "Hey, we were talking about that time that you saw that really traumatic event. I'm wondering if you can describe that to me again, like sort of real briefly." And you kind of remind them again that you need it even quicker. And a lot of times they'll get the message the second or third time.
Right. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to start using that approach, man, because I would always get caught up with that. I'm like, ah, man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But thank you again, Will. We really
There's
appreciate it. This was a great session, and like I told folks, um, we'll be sharing this recording with folks. So we'll definitely be sending this out. Like I said, if you guys wanted to check out Will's presentation, email him. Also, if you email me as well, I can send it to you as well, along with the recording. Um, but yeah, this has been great, man. Thank you again. And definitely check out his book. I know he said I think around December, the book will be out. Definitely check that out. We'll definitely promote that. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us today. I hope you got a lot out of it. I sure did. But yeah, Clint said, "Thanks, man." That's Clint's our ED. He said it was a great presentation and
yeah,
information. So Clint was on the
great.
call today as well, man. He enjoyed it.
Great. I see some names I recognize, Eric Barstow, and yeah, and that's, just want to point out, good point, that Eric gives himself at least 2 hours for setting up. It depends on how complicated your setup is, but didn't want to ignore those little comments over in the chat there. But thanks, Christopher, and thanks Southern Documentary Fund for giving me this opportunity. This is really wonderful, really fun. And this was the first time I've given this webinar, so I welcome any feedback. If anybody wants to send me emails, please do.
Will do, will do. Well, all right, everyone. It was good to have you on today. Like I said, we have a couple of events coming up next month. August 27th, we have a webinar, a resource webinar on the ethics resource library. And then also we have a screening as well on Kinema the week before that of Refuge. So we'll see you guys again. Guys, enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and also get those grant applications in, get those grant applications in. If you have a film that's in production, get that grant application in, and also join us next Tuesday, July 29th for the info session. Y'all have a good one.